Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Connors. I'm the president of the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and it's my pleasure to welcome you back to the Maine Take. This week, as the weeks of the past, we're going to take a look at the people, the policies, and the politics at work in our state and in our nation. And today, our lineup touches all three of those areas. But I must say that I am privileged to welcome our very first guest, our second Congressional District Representative Jared Golden. Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I'm reading a lot about you in the paper over the weekends. And let's start on that subject. The PPP or the COVID Act has been passed in the House with the exception of two Democrats who voted against it. You were one of those two. It now moves to the Senate. It seems to me that you expressed a lot of positive concerning some of the urgent needs, but you also had anxiety around whether we need to do it right now and also the total amount. So talk to us about that and the decision that you took.
Thanks, Dana, and good to be here with you. I think the statement speaks for itself. And if you watched my press conference, which I think ended up getting streamed live on Saturday, then it probably answers most of your questions. I think most important is that I think the most important aspect of the entire bill put forward by President Biden is the continued support for people who have lost jobs or lost wages. So the unemployment. I certainly recognize that we need to extend that. In fact, I would support perhaps even going further as the economy continues to indicate that that is necessary than the end of August, which is what this House bill does. I also clearly everyone recognizes the importance of getting vaccines out as quickly as possible to the entire population. But data as I looked at the entirety of the bill. Things like the rental assistance, I think it was $30 billion they proposed. We had just passed about $25 billion in December, and it's only today, this very day in Maine, that program is opening up for applications. Food SNAP in December, I joined my colleagues, the entire Maine delegation and most of Congress in supporting a 15% increase in food assistance for families in Maine and across the country. That is in place through the end of June. Schools in Maine, you've probably seen recent stories that much of the money we've already sent to them through the CARES Act and CARES Act 2 is still in place and has yet to be spent. Much of what's been proposed in this current bill, unlikely to be spent until the end of 2022, I think are some of the statistics I'm seeing. So yes, while I am strongly supportive of almost all of these things, the timing in the context and where we are today really matters, Dana, and I'm sure you would agree. In March of 2020, we were in a dire situation with the beginning of the pandemic. And so, you saw all of Congress very supportive of a multi-trillion-dollar proposal similar to this one. Again, this past December, $900 billion as we were entering into the winter months, we were all concerned about the economy and public health with rising cases. It's not the same situation we're in now. And that's not to say that we don't have need out there in the community or to make light of it. And as I said, I'm supportive of meeting that need. But I think we have to balance things as we now near $6 trillion soon, with Biden's anticipated infrastructure package, $8 trillion or more in just over a year's time. I think we need to start really focusing on the priority, helping the people that truly need it, as this economy is kind of doing this K-shaped economic recovery, which many people have spoken about.
Yeah, and it now goes to the Senate, and from all indications, I'd be interested in your opinion in this regard, but from all indications, it appears there will be some attempt to add or delete things, but it appears, perhaps with the exception of the minimum wage increase to 15, it looks like it's likely to go through. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement, although I don't know. You got to talk to some senators about that. But where could they take some stuff out, Dana? And I think this is important. This bill sends direct federal checks to households earning up to $200,000.
Yeah.
We could take that back and we could put it towards extending unemployment for people that are still unemployed at the end of this summer, if that's what the economy demands. And I think that's the best thing we can do for our economy if unemployment is still high. This bill gives healthcare subsidies to some households making income up around $250,000 a year. That's not the middle class. It's not the working class. And those aren't the people who are hurting right now. To me, that is where the Senate could focus on drawing down some of this money to save it or to reprioritize it towards the true need that's out there in this country right now.
Yeah, well said. Let's move on. When I take a look at your committee assignments, you are in some very key positions, whether it's rural development for small business, in which you are the chair of that subcommittee, but also in the shipbuilding industry where you are vice chair of that as well. Congratulations on both of those. I think it's extremely commendable and reflective of your hard work and your stewardship. But speak to those committees and your approach and the value you see how they affect Maine and Maine's future.
Well, the Small Business Committee, I think, speaks quite clearly to the situation in Maine. The vast majority of our businesses are small businesses, and you know that.
Yep.
Your members know that. They are those small businesses. So that's why I'm very pleased to be on that committee. It's why I chose to stay on that committee. I am very excited to be chairing the subcommittee that is going to be looking at rural issues for small businesses, but also underserved communities. So I suspect you're going to see that I'll be using that committee to kind of look at some of the overlap. There are urban communities that are underserved and economically struggling who lack broadband, just like we do in rural Maine as well. And I think we need to be digging in on that. Setting aside the more, the urban rural conversation, just looking at Maine, I think we can look at a lot from our farming communities as an example. What are, some of the disadvantages that a smaller farmer has, a small family farm in Maine relative to some of the bigger farms in the Midwest and other, policies that we need to be taking a look at that could help them. But broadband and certainly supporting Main Street businesses in rural communities is what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, on that committee in particular, it's when you think of the land area that you represent, that was the largest east of the Mississippi, and it represents, I think it's like 80% of our land area in the state. So it's a big district, but it clearly is rural by anyone's definition. Let's move to the shipbuilding, because that's one that I won't say it's been threatened, but there's been concerns in the past several years, and putting you in that key position as vice chair has to be a bonus for the state of Maine, and we appreciate that very much.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be there. It's clearly important to Maine's economy. It's even more important to every one of those families of those workers at Bath Iron Works and the young men and women who are coming into the shipyard looking to build a career like so many have before them. Just a proud tradition there. It is an easy one to support for that reason, but also because it's in the best interest of our national security. Someone that served in the military, was in an infantry unit and fought in the Middle East, I can tell you a lot of the focus is, shifting on trying to get us unentangled from conflicts in the Middle East and focusing, out to a rising security threats out there, which are going to require a strong Navy. I know that there has been some concern through the years, but bottom line is they make a really quality ship, Dana, and they know it, and the Navy knows it. And the destroyer is a critical kind of backbone of our Navy fleet. It serves a very specific and important role in the fleet architecture, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I certainly am going to be using that position as vice chair, which I'm really appreciative of the committee choosing me to do that. Chairman Courtney, also from New England, is understands the significance of this for the country and for the entire region. Certainly going to be looking at using that position to protect not only Bath Iron Works, but in so doing, be making sure we have the strongest Navy possible.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, we worry because of the impact that that industry has, BIW has on our state's economy, but they are the best built because they're Bath built. But it also is reassuring to know that our delegation has that as a top priority, and positions in Washington matter, and having you as a vice chair is extremely important. There's another issue in Maine at the moment that we're reading a lot about, and it's an issue that's been around for a while, but at the moment we know that it's one of interest to you as well as a delegation, and that is the threat to our lobster industry by virtue of rulemaking that puts the right whale right in conflict with an industry that is so vital to our state's heritage as well as our future. And I know that you have taken a leadership role in that as well. Do you want to speak to that for a moment or two?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Dana. I actually have a letter right here that I led, and the delegation joined me to the President of the United States. We sent similar communications to then President Trump. This one addressed to President Biden, asking them to take another look at this, to think long and hard about the cost of these regulations and whether or not the benefit outweighs the cost to our communities, our fishing communities. And in fact, is there any benefit at all? So I think the important thing to point out, Dana, is that the fishing community does not want to ignore any harm that's being done to the right whales. In fact, they've acknowledged it in the past. And in so doing, they've worked with the government and with organizations that want to protect the right whale. What do I mean by that? In 1997, they started to use something that's called weak links in their rope. They've implemented sinking ground lines in 2009, which should reduce the likelihood of entanglements. They went on to reduce the number of vertical lines in the water in 2014. And the point is it worked? This is the key data is there hasn't been a single right whale injury or mortality attributed to our fishing community since 2002. Between 97 and 2017, we haven't had any right whale entanglements attributed to our gear. So it kind of begs the question: if there's no data showing that our fishery is contributing to this problem, then what problem are you going to solve by coming up with more regulations on this fishery? And in this case, it goes way too far. These fishermen are very concerned that this essentially puts them out of business by 2030, which would be devastating economically to those communities up and down the coast of Maine.
Oh, it is. I mean, I could not agree more. It's an issue that we've seen kind of emerge to a level that it's at today. And we're grateful for your leadership on this issue, but also how the delegation has really come together to push back, because the importance of the lobster industry is without question.
Well, this is a really bad example, Dana. This is, I guess, sadly, a good example of a law being misused and abused and implemented in a nonsensical way that is just, leads to people questioning whether or not the government is on their side. When good laws are put to use in common sense ways, and with smart data, and it makes for good policy, people get on board, as we can see from the history. Exactly. with the regulations that they need to meet. But when there's unfairness in it and it's unjust, that's just not the way government is supposed to be working.
No, and that speaks well of the industry. They'll accept those that work, and they'll speak out against those that don't. And it's nice to have people like yourself there to help us in that cause. I could use another half hour because you're involved in so many important things that affect the state of Maine. But I want to take a moment to acknowledge a number of things that I think that I want you to hear from myself, and I know others agree with this. When we think back to the election that was just had, and we saw a Senate race that was divisive and was hard for Mainers to take, because it was what we it was divisive. It was a result of a lot of money and some things that were some anger that was expressed and frustration. And we know campaigns are campaigns, but I begin with acknowledging that yours was not like that. And I think people looked to your particular race as something that they are more apt to think of as elections of the past. We commend you for that. But I also want to acknowledge your district. It's a district from which I come, and it represents in Aroostook County, my home area. So I've got to know it well over the years. I still consider it a home and always will. But I will acknowledge it's a district that's large in terms of geography, diverse in terms of opinions, probably more conservative than not in terms of their leanings, as you probably have experienced. But I commend you for the way that you have looked at issues. You have followed the party when it was appropriate. You have spoken out when you felt that it better served your constituents. That is following the line of a lot of extremely successful senators and representatives that we've had in the past. And you've been able to make that balance and to serve the public in a way that's been, to me, very commendable. And I congratulate you for that, because that is both a skill and a gift that you possess. And I hope the people in that district appreciate that. I know they do, because of this was your second term. You won it pretty decisively, and Congress and leadership there is rewarding you for your hard work. So nice job.
Well, thank you, Dana. I appreciate that. All I can say is I follow my gut. I use my mind to gather as much information and that I can to reach a decision, and then I follow my heart. That is sometimes going to go one way in the eyes of one person, and sometimes another. But as long as they can see, what's in my heart, the approach that I take, then I hope that people will continue to appreciate that approach. I thank you for your remarks, and I'm just tired of the ugliness in politics. It doesn't motivate me. I like to think I've come to this for the right reasons, to make a difference in this country and in our community. And I would have to say I thank Dale Crafts as well for joining me in what was largely a positive campaign. We didn't pull punches. We criticized each other, but we did it the right way. And it wasn't a toxic campaign. It was a good one. And I thank him for that too. I thought a class act, and this is a thing I brought home from me. Or to DC with me from the State House. You might recognize it. The civility pen, not easy, but the right thing to do. So thank you.
Clearly, in this day and age, it is not easy, but you are doing it the right way, and we thank you for that. You serve your people very, very well. Congressman, we thank you again, and we know how busy you are, but to give us 20 minutes is very special and greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you. You take care. We'll see you in Maine.
Thanks. Now I want to turn to state of Maine and a week that we have just begun today. It's called the Restaurant Week. And it is a week that was started by our next guest back in 2008. That's when it was conceived. But I think the first Restaurant Week, and I'll ask her to correct me if I'm wrong, was on 2009, March the 1st, on or about that time. And this would, if that's true, this would represent the 13th year. But this year has had new challenges. And I'm very pleased to welcome the founder of Restaurant Week here in Maine, Jillian Brett. Jillian, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. And I want to begin by thanking you for what you created, which would be 13 years ago, and for the success it has brought to the people of Maine, and just being able to celebrate and appreciate the restaurant industry and all that it means to us. So thank you for that. That's how I want to begin. But I want you to also talk a bit about this week, because this week, because of the year that we're in and the time that we're in, it had been so easy for you to walk away because a pandemic could have been a very easy reason to do that, but you didn't. Now, admittedly, it's probably different. I know it's different, and I'd ask you to begin there by sharing with our viewers what prompted you to have it this year, knowing that's a pandemic. What was done differently?
Definitely, and it is very different this year. We spent a lot of time talking about whether or not we thought it made sense to plan a Maine Restaurant Week given the pandemic. And we wanted to be sure that we created something that felt safe for customers and that worked for the restaurants as well. And so this year, the website looks a little bit different. The MaineRestaurantWeek.com has curbside as an option. It has outside dining as a field, and of course, indoor dining as well, so that customers can easily see what the different venues are offering. And then for the chefs, in order to make it easier for them, especially if they're operating as a solo person, some of them are down to one person doing all the cooking and the dishes and serving. So we wanted to make it easy for them. We waived the 3-course requirement. Traditionally, Restaurant Week is a 3-course prefix menu. And this year, it really has met restaurants, owners, and chefs where they are. And they have been encouraged to create some kind of offering. And it could be a 3-course menu, but it also could be just a very special dish that's available only during Maine Restaurant Week. And that definitely simplified things for the different participants.
And speaking of that, talk a bit about the level of participation. I understand it goes from Camden to Algonquin and points in between, like Brunswick, Bath, and so forth. What has the participation been? It's been to your expectation?
It is. It's definitely a different group this year, which has really been interesting to see. We have a much more geographically diverse representation when you look online. And there's somebody in Litchfield, and as you mentioned, Ogunquit and Camden and Brunswick. So it's more spread out. In years past, it has been more largely focused on the greater Portland area with kind of a scattering in Lewiston and maybe some in Bangor. So it's definitely expanded from that perspective. The number of restaurants is about the same. So it's definitely, it's going to look different this year for sure.
So you mentioned your website. Would you mind repeating that? Because I'm assuming that on the website, you can find out which restaurants are participating and what they have to offer as usual.
Yeah, if you go to MaineRestaurantWeek.com, you can actually filter by city if you want, or you can just scroll through the whole list and you can see every single place that's participating. And then if you just click on the name of the venue that's participating, you can see what their Restaurant Week offer is.
Oh, nice. Yeah, you've been on to promote this, and I'm grateful that you have. And I hope that this program, which is people can access live stream or on YouTube, will help get the word out, because again, it's a wonderful week to be able to pay tribute and to say thanks to an industry that's very important to us, that, as you have said, it's been hard hit and some aren't around because of the pandemic, but anything and everything we can do to bolster their existence, I'm sure is of help. And you have been instrumental in that. I can't thank you enough. Is there something else that we've left out that you'd like to say in terms of promoting this week?
Well, I think it's just really important to remember that Maine Restaurant Week supports not only the restaurant that you are supporting, but if it has servers, it helps them. If it has the bartenders, it helps them. It helps the food growers and providers and distributors. It really has a much larger ripple effect than most people stop to think about. So it's important to get out there and do what you can.
That's right. Thank you very much and good luck. And I'll be seeing you probably at one of those restaurants. So
I hope so. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I'm also pleased to welcome to our show this week an old friend of ours. I'll take the accent off the old, but a friend of ours. His name is Robert, Bobby Reynolds, as we refer to him. Robert is what his parents probably call him, but we refer to him as Bobby. And you know what? If he's a guy that has had experience in both policy and politics, and today he comes to us representing a national coalition. It's bipartisan in nature, Has some representation both from business as well as environmental communities and a lot of high-powered names, I might add. And while we know that climate change is an important issue for our country, but also our state, their approach is a little different in terms of how do you reduce the footprint, carbon footprint. And they use not carbon tax, but carbon dividends. So Bobby, I'm gonna use this next few minutes to kind of tease up a program that we're gonna go into more depth and detail in the next couple of weeks. But because of its importance and because of how it can help us achieve what we want in climate change, give us a bit about the coalition that you represent, but also the application of the dividend versus the tax.
Thank you, Dana, for letting us come on the show, and we look forward to getting into this in a more in-depth discussion. It's exciting. The challenge of climate change is something that gets a lot of discussion, but many times the solutions are regulatory in nature and not really something the business community sees as a positive thing, punitive, whether it's taxes or cap and trades. And we've been talking about this stuff for a number of years. I think a decade ago, there were some efforts to establish some cap and trade stuff, and they really fell flat. This proposal, interesting enough, has been drafted by James Baker and the late George P. Schultz, a couple of big thinkers and not known as environmental radicals, certainly. It's brought together both the business community and the environmental community, as well as bipartisan lawmakers. And it's something that we're excited about, and we look forward to talking with you more about. It's not a tax, it's a dividend similar to what the oil companies pay to Alaskans. And it could benefit Maine families to the tune of a couple $1,000s a year in a dividend sent out in a quarterly check. So we'll be able to get into it in greater depth, certainly in a future show. For folks that want to learn more, the group is called Americans for Carbon Dividends. We have a website, of course. It's afcd.org. So you can go to that website. You can check out the proposal, see who's behind it, what it's comprised of. And you can also sign up to get updates. So I know we'll be talking about this in the future, and you may have just seen the Business Roundtable and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has come out and said we need to address this in a market-based way that encourages entrepreneurship and innovation rather than a regulatory, stick and carrot method. So
Exactly.
It's an opportunity.
No, you said it well, and I think it is a very encouraging way to address an issue that's important to us. And Bobby, I thank you for being with us today, and also look forward to being able to get into this in more depth to give us more time to better understand it, because with the people that are behind it and the efforts that they represent, that I think that there's something here and that we all should know more about it. So thanks. I look forward to having you back on. Yeah, well, thank you. I next want to take a few moments to talk with Peter Gore, who is the head of our advocacy team and also executive vice president. We try to have all three on, but we also recognize that we try to get as much into the program as we possibly can. And there's a couple issues out there that are front and center that we think that the business community and the people of Maine should better understand. So Peter, why don't you take a couple of minutes to bring our viewers up to date on what those are?
Thank you, Dana. Well, as folks know, it's been a rough 12 months for businesses, particularly small businesses, with the pandemic and the impact on the economy and on their businesses. Even though it appears that maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel, that doesn't mean their problems are going to go away just because the economy opens back up again. Many of them were going to have longstanding issues, debt associated with things like vendors or rent or things like that. So we're at the chamber, we're obviously very conscious about bills that are going to increase the cost of doing business here or make it less desirable to move your business here or stay here. So two bills were printed last week that obviously are a concern to us. One is a new bill, new in the fact that it didn't come out on the 129th, but we were dealing with it as far back as 20 years ago in the legislature, and that's LD 553. And it would end what's known as employment at will in Maine. In the United States, I believe it's 48 out of 50 states have employment at will, which means you can be discharged or disciplined at your place of business for almost any reason, so long as an employer you don't violate any protections that are found in things like the Maine Human Rights Act, the Whistleblower Act, the EEOC protections, OSHA, things like that. There are a lot of workplace protections for you, but Maine follows what the vast majority of other states do and has an employment at will arrangement. This bill would require an employer to adopt a model disciplinary procedure that would be developed by, it appears, the Maine Department of Labor, and it would impact every kind of discipline an employer might provide their employee, right up and including termination. It's very complicated. It's very time consuming for an employer. And it would also be expensive because it almost guarantees that any type of discharge in the workplace is going to be litigated because there's no reason not to be honest with you. So that's a bill that's a great concern to us. It would put us at a competitive disadvantage if we were to enact such a legislation. Nobody has it in New England that I'm aware of. So as I indicated, I believe there's only 2 states that have something like that. The second bill is a bill that did appear in the 129th legislature and died when the full legislature adjourned in mid-March of last year. And it's LD 607, an act to restore overtime protections for Maine workers. As many of our members know, and some of our listeners will know as well, there are employees who are hourly, and there are employees who are salaried employees. And how you determine who is eligible for salaried status versus hourly status is by a number of different factors, including the jobs that they have and the responsibilities they have, but also how much they make, their wage, their wage base. And in Maine, the salary line that separates whether you are potentially an hourly employee and thus subject to overtime if you work more than 40 hours, or a salaried employee and not eligible for overtime wages, is an overtime or a salary threshold standard of $36,450. It's 3,000 times the state's minimum wage. And it's been that way since 1999. That was the standard the legislature adopted back then. As you know, it was a fairly controversial issue. President Obama tried to change the threshold nationally when President Trump was elected 4 years ago. The Obama regs had just been struck down by a federal court. The former President Trump directed the Department of Labor to do some rulemaking around this issue, and they did, and the national standard was raised to $35,000 and change. This bill would take Maine's 36,000 plus, and eventually by January of 2024, have it at $55,000. It would be the highest in the United States. That would make things very difficult for Maine businesses, particularly small businesses who can't afford to pay their managers more than $55,000 a year. It also complicates the workplace. If you're a manager now and you're suddenly going to be moved to an hourly employee, that means they're going to take your phone, your laptop, your tablet, anything that you might use to work after hours, because you'd be then eligible for potentially overtime pay, or certainly hourly wages that would then later put you over the overtime threshold. Very expensive bill.
Thanks, Peter. 2 issues that clearly everyone in the state of Maine should keep their eye on, and provide us with your information that'll help us make the case. You can be sure that we will be there because they are issues extremely important to the employer and the employee, and as it relates to the success of our economy. So thanks, Peter, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next Monday. With that, let's turn our remaining time to this week's takeaway. As you recall, last week we used the words of Alex Haley, the author of that popular book in the mid-70s, Roots. His words of advice were, when challenged, find the good and praise it. Yeah, we looked at that through the eyes of the challenges around the pandemic and realized how tough it was. There was still some redeeming features because people were finding in Maine how safe it was, how caring people were, and they were coming here because of our quality of life. We also took a look and an appreciation of what you heard today with Congressman Golden, that when you put the politics aside and the labels of whether liberal or conservative, and you evaluate them based upon their commitment, their care, their service, Maine is very fortunate today as we have been in the past. Well, we're going to continue that same theme this week because our guest today gave us reason why. Because when you think about it, it was just about everything that we do in our life for our livelihood. Finding the good is important. It's important in terms of everything from the pandemic to our economy. And today, by way of our guest, it appeared to me that one of the means to the end is found in a word that each and every one of us finds within ourselves if we have the courage to look at it in terms of its worth. And that word is attitude. It really is the means to the end. It helps us find the good so that we can praise it. And think about our guest today, Congressman Golden. His attitude was not to follow the party, but was to do what was good, what he felt that the economy of Maine and the district that he represented would be best served. But because of his hard work and his dedication, he found himself in those key leadership positions that could serve the people of Maine in the best way possible, particularly when you look at the profile of his very rural district and the number of small businesses. For Gillian, you could place that same attitude in her position as well. She created a program that has become very important to Maine. It highlights and celebrates the value of our restaurants and all the people that are associated with that industry. Extremely important. She could have taken the easy way out, but as she said, it's more important this year than ever. And she did it in a way that respected the responsibilities that go with COVID-19. Both of them demonstrated the right attitude and the type of attitude that it takes to really make a difference. But it also, in the process, reminded me of something that I heard several years ago. It came from a national or an economist with a national reputation. And he was speaking to a group of several people, hundreds actually, about the recession at the time and how best to move your economy out of that recession. And he went through the various aspects and intricacies of what makes an economy work and how best to move it forward. And he left with these words. Well, he left with the value that attitude has on an economy. And his words, it accounted to about 75% of the contribution to a successful economy. And he used these words, which are the words of somebody else, actually, Charles Swindoll, as I recall, who was both a poet and a preacher. But these are the words he used to express the role that each of us have and our attitude. And this is what he said: the longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts, than past experience or money, than circumstances, success or failure, than what other people think, say, or do. It is more important than giftedness, appearance, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a family at home. And I would hasten to add, although he didn't say it, decision makers at both Congress as well as our own legislature. But the remarkable thing about attitude is that each and every day, we have a choice regarding the attitude that we will use for that day. We're not going to change the past. We're not going to change the fact that people act in a certain way, and we're not going to change the inevitable. The only thing that we can do is play on the one string that's available to us, and that's our attitude. Life is 10% of what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you as it is with me. We are in charge of our attitude. That's what he left, encouraging us to think about. And that's what our guest showed to me today in terms of what it takes to do the things that they do and have done. Yes, in good times or bad times, good times or challenging times, your attitude has a lot to do with finding the good. It's also whether it's in a pandemic or a successful economy, in life or in love. That's why they say so often that attitude is everything. That is the main take for this week. I sure want to thank our guests, our sponsors, and all of you for tuning in. And we look forward to seeing you right back here next week. We hope that we'll have guests on so that we can celebrate that important day, the International Women's Day. In the meantime, take care of yourself and don't forget to take care of others. With that, I bid you a good day. See you right back here next Monday at 3 o'clock.